All right, in this screencast, we're going to be talking about the 5 forms of government and the 3 economic systems that those types of governments oftentimes choose to disperse resources in their countries. So let's get started here with the 5 forms of government. Now, the first one that we want to talk about is an absolute monarchy. Okay, and there are still some absolute monarchies that are around today. For instance, the country of Swaziland and Oman both have absolute monarchies, where the power is inherited. It's passed on from one generation to the next, and those rulers have absolute rule over their countries. The king or queen or ruling family has all the power. They make the laws, but they're not subject to them, so they can go above the law. Not like the United States, where the president has to still follow the law. And that means they don't have a social contract with the people in their country, meaning that they don't have to follow rules that are set up and agreed upon by all those inside of their country. So the first form of government that we need to know about is the absolute monarchy, where most of that power, actually all of the power, rests in a ruling family. One ruler. Absolute monarchy. The next form of government is one that you're probably a little bit more familiar with, and that's representative democracy. And this is called a couple of different things. It might be representative democracy, could be indirect democracy, or it could be a republic. Okay, so they all kind of mean the same thing. And this basically means that government has the power to make laws, and they collect and spend taxes and oversee police and military forces. But we pick them. The people pick who is in power. Okay, so the power is really in the power of the majority. Do you have enough people to get enough votes to control government? If you do, then you can choose how or what laws are made, how to collect and spend taxes, and how the police and military act. Do we have a social contract? Yes, absolutely. If the government does not do what the people like, it gets voted out. Our third type of government is called an oligarchy. Okay, and you can see from an oligarchy, it's a group or rule by a few powerful group leaders runs a country. There's a lot of discussion about, what modern day oligarchies are around. And there's a lot of talk about the Russian Federation as a possible oligarchy, where very rich and very powerful people are actually kind of running the country behind the scenes. And a few people actually grumble that the United States is turning into an oligarchy. But that's not necessarily the case as we're talking about it in class. Now, where's the power? Well, oligarchy has the power to tax, to make laws, to provide security. And these officials, whether they're elected or whether they are the group that holds power, are going to be in charge of making all of these things. So an oligarchy is ruled by a few. Now, one of the benefits is that decisions get made pretty quick. You don't have to wait for your elected representatives to figure it out. You can just kind of have this ruling class decide, and then the rest of the country follows suit. The contract, it really just does depend. It can or cannot have a social contract depending on where this oligarchy forms. Okay, there may be no contract with the oligarchy if it was a group of military leaders or powerful people that took over a country, or there may be a social contract in places like the Russian Federation, where they do have elections, but these guys are kind of behind the scenes. So the ruling class in the oligarchy really doesn't have a social contract with the people. Now, our next form of government that we want to talk about is fascism or a dictatorship. Now, in a dictatorship, an individual takes power through military force, and they may have started actually as an elected individual, but the power really resides in one person. And the law and order for a fascist dictatorship is done by that ruling party that person in power controls. And they fill all the positions of the police, of judges, and of lawmakers. So you can tell, who is making rules for that country. Now, they don't really have a social contract with the people because they took power through force. It wasn't voluntary means. These fascist dictatorships can be very good for economic growth. They can be very good for security because they're going to set the laws and they're going to enforce the laws. And they can make decisions very quickly, but they also really are restrictive on personal freedoms. And without that social contract, it's very difficult for people to get rid of this type of government once it takes root in their country. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, there's our fifth and final form of government, and that's a direct democracy. And this is where government really is the people, because each person has a direct say in government. Okay, and they have the power to directly make laws, collect and spend taxes as they see fit, oversee police and military operations, all those things, because each citizen is allowed to directly vote and voice their opinion in government. Okay, so law and order, every single person votes, and a social contract, absolutely, because this is the most inclusive form of government of the types of five that we have. Okay, so our 5 types of government there, we have direct democracy, fascism dictatorship, oligarchy, representative democracy, and absolute monarchy. So we need to be familiar with all 5, as well as some of the benefits and drawbacks of each. So absolute monarchy, representative democracy, oligarchy, fascism dictatorship, direct democracy. Those are the 5 you need to know. Now, regardless of what type of government you may have, each government structure can actually pick a different type of economic system to help them disperse resources in their area, in their countries. And there are 3 different types of economic systems we're going to kind of look at this year. The first of which is communism. Okay, and the communist ideal was really, really big at the end of World War II and all the way up until about 1990. Okay, there are a lot of countries that tried this out. And the idea is that there's one political party in power. And this political party may rule the country in like an oligarchy style, but the power really rests with that communist party. So you want to be a member of that communist party because that's kind of who controls everything. Now the resources, like the factors of production, land, labor, and capital, those are all controlled and maintained by the government. So that one political party rules all of it. There's no real private property in these communist systems. Okay, and the social contract for these people is that the Communist Party will provide everything that you need. Okay, one of the great things is, hey, everybody gets something. There's guaranteed stuff for the lowest of the low. But the problem oftentimes with communism is that it hinders or doesn't support creativity and innovation. Okay, it kind of just blahs everybody into mediocrity, being mediocre, not going for their best. Right? So communism is one of the economic systems we need to be familiar with. Socialism is another type of economic system, and this often arises through free elections. Indirect democracies, republics, oftentimes will become socialist. Okay, the government plays a very large role in the economy, and the power is through high taxes. Okay, so they pass laws and they have very high taxes, which allow them to provide many goods and services to their people. And they also typically own some of the largest factors of production, possibly the oil or the steel industries. Okay, so that will allow them to get a lot of money to provide lots of services for the people. A great example of this is Sweden, so you can see on the map over there. And the third and final type of economic system is the idea of capitalism. And this is one where the government does play a role in the economy, but it really varies depending on what type of country you're in. In the United States, the government does have a role in the economy. They do regulate what types of business we can have or how we conduct business. And they get the power to do this through taxes and passing different laws to provide economic security to their people. And the big thing in capitalism is that the resources, the factors of production, those are privately owned. So individual citizens decide how best to use them. And a benefit of that is that capitalist economies can react really quickly to changes in consumer taste. Whereas communist economies, or socialist economies, they have a big clunky government trying to decide what's best and how to use it, instead of having individuals who are highly motivated to make income make those decisions instead. Okay, so those 3 types of economic systems we're going to want to be familiar with: capitalism, socialism, and communism. Okay, communism, socialism, and capitalism. All three of those can be paired with really any type of government, but some happen to work much better in certain sections or in certain types of governments than others. So make sure you review these 5 different types of governments and 3 different types of economic systems. And it might help to kind of think to yourself, what type of government would you most like to live in? Why? What are some of the advantages or disadvantages of living in that type of government? And it might not necessarily be an indirect democracy or representative democracy like we have in the United States here. But think to yourself, why would you benefit? And how might that be different if you were a citizen in that other type of government?